rolling along swimmingly. but I'm getting pretty good at quick flip. And of course, you probably saw the email that Brian's working. Yeah, he's can't. Yes, apparently. Pardon? I wouldn't. Yeah, he is. I think that it's more a function of how much time he's going to be spending out. You know? Oh, yeah, I was on the. Penny, can you hear me all right? I think you're still on mute.
We're good.
Thank you. You got Gavin as a co-host too? Okay, great. Gavin, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Thank you. Only two on so far. And we're let's go short of the corn. Right. You know, I did that last month, and I'm kind of hoping habit to stick. Yeah.
but I'm usually kind of not. You didn't know if you
Well, the EOS world tells you that you need to be in your chair ready to go 5 minutes before the meeting starts so that meetings can start on time.
Yeah, every time I crank up mine, I thought it needs an up right there, you know, so kill 15, 20 minutes if I don't get started.
Yep.
As a student teacher many years ago, I put a professional looking sticker on the copy machine that said this one's got the latest in anxiety software. So the more anxious you are, the less likely it's going to work. Some of the teachers were like, what? New technology. They just quit using the memory card.
Brian, would you check your mic, please?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Scott, would you check your mic, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Gavin, would you check your mic, please?
All right, can you hear me?
This is forward, but we got
Well, I
No,
lost
Mr.
Steve. He was on, but then he popped off again. Karen, would you check your mic, please? Karen, if you check again, please.
Okay, testing.
Great. Thank you.
Steve, come back.
Not yet. Nathan's here. Nathan, would you check your mic?
Yes, is it working?
Yes, sir. Good to go.
Excellent, excellent.
Let everybody except for Mike and Steve Strickland.
Just so you know, I was having some trouble with that link and wasn't sure how to get in. So they may be having something similar.
All right. Is he not? Okay.
Take the period off the end of the link is what I did. It got me in.
All right. Alex, let's let everybody in. We'll get started.
You saw Steve for a minute.
Yeah, he was on, and then he was not. All right, it is 7:03, and we'll call tonight's meeting of the Oconee County Planning Commission to order. Good evening and welcome to the February 15th, 2021 meeting of the Oconee County Planning Commission. We are a recommending body to the Oconee County Board of Commissioners. Decisions made tonight on rezoning requests and other issues will be forwarded to the Oconee Board of Commissioners or appropriate city council for action. Tonight's agenda and sign-in sheets for people wishing to speak are available outside the commission chambers. Anyone participating remotely wishing to speak should use the raise hand function located at the bottom of the Zoom window during the relevant request. This is the procedure we will follow. The Oconee County Planning Department staff presents their report and recommendations on each request. Public input is received from the petitioner or petitioner's representative. Public input is received from a group representative or any individuals speaking in favor of the request. This period will be limited to 20 minutes total. Input will alternate between in-person and online participants. The petitioner or petitioner's public input is received from a group representative or any individuals speaking in opposition to the request. This period will also be limited to 20 minutes total. Input will also, again, alternate between in-person and online participants. The petitioner or petitioner's representative is allowed an opportunity for response or clarification subject to the 20-minute limit for people speaking in favor of the request. The public input session will then be closed. The Planning Commission will discuss the request and may ask questions of Planning Department staff and/or the petitioner. Upon a motion and a second, and after any discussion of the motion, the Planning Commission will then vote on the motion. The Commission may elect to approve, modify, place conditions on, table, or deny a motion. We ask that you observe the following items regarding public input. Upon approaching the podium or being recognized online, please state your name and home address. Please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the audience. When there are multiple speakers, please avoid repeating statements made by previous speakers so that there is time to hear from everyone. We ask the audience to extend the courtesy of not applauding or commenting on any of the speakers. First order of business tonight is the approval of the minutes. Commissioners, you have available to you a copy of the minutes from the January 19th, 2021 meeting. Please take a moment to review and indicate if you have any corrections, changes, or alterations. If you do not, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Stephen Strickland. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second, Scott Green.
All right, we have a motion from Stephen Strickland and a second from Scott Green to approve the minutes. Brian, how do you vote?
Approve.
Nathan?
Approve.
Scott?
Approve.
Chuck?
Approve.
Penny?
Approve.
Karen?
Approve.
Stephen?
Approve.
And Gavin? Gavin, how do you vote?
I'm sorry, my mic was closed. I thought y'all had it approved.
Thank you. All right, motion carries. First order of new business on the agenda, as there is no old business, is Rezone P20-0260, Oconee Mercantile LLC and Sela Farm LLC. Scott? Guy, if you would give me just a second to make sure. Stephen, would you check your mic, please?
Testing.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Your first case this evening is Rezone P20-0260 Oconee Mercantile LLC, Sela Farm LLC. This is located just north of the city of Watkinsville, along 441. This is the aerial that shows the location of the three parcels that are part of the rezone for this evening. You'll notice it's adjacent to Hog Mountain and Macon Highway. It's currently zoned OBP, industrial, and OBP and industrial. This is the future land use map showing the surrounding land use categories, civic center in which the majority of this property lies, country estates, and suburban neighborhood. Again, the rezone is to rezone the property from OBP, Office Business Park District, and Industrial District to B2 to construct a multi-use commercial development consisting of retail shops, restaurants, and office space. A companion rezone P20-0261 and special use 0263 are requested to allow the existing stone store to relocate to a nearby parcel. You have this concept plan in your packets that you've been given, showing the overall development on those three parcels. This is a zoomed in slide for your use as well, showing the main building that's existing, future buildings, and the relocation or removal of the stone store, which is located at this location. Again, you have the architectural representative images that have been forwarded to you and posted for the proposed project. And staff recommends conditional approval of the rezone with the following conditions. 1, 2, and 3 conditions are our standard conditions. We'll jump down to number 4. In order to facilitate pedestrian connectivity with future commercial development, a sidewalk shall be installed in the right-of-way along the subject's property's frontage between parcel C03M and 002 and C03017AB. Number 5, total building square footage on the site shall not exceed 162,508 square feet. Number 6, no delivery truck shall operate on the site, nor dumpster pickup or emptying occur between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. on any day of the week. Number 7, along the rear property line abutting residential use, all parking areas and drive aisles shall be screened from view by a 10-foot wide planted landscape buffer. Said buffers shall be planted at grade with the parking lot and drive aisles in order to create an opaque screen year-round and shall be 6 feet tall at the time of planting. Number 8, the lift station at the rear of the property shall be screened by an opaque fence and evergreen vegetative screen to be 6 feet tall at the time of planting. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, guys. Now we'll hear from the petitioner or petitioner's representative.
Good evening. My name is Dave Mulkey. I live at 1596 Derby Hill Lane, Watkinsville, Georgia. Mr. Commissioner and Commission, I appreciate y'all letting me have the opportunity to speak tonight on this project. So to start with, I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of an introduction on who I am. I'm not an out-of-town developer. I live just over a mile from the subject property that we're discussing tonight in the Old Farm Subdivision. And I've lived in Oconee County for over 20 years now. I've made my living as a developer, quite often working out of state on student housing projects. It's probably most known for building a project called the Woodlands, which there's one in Athens. It won a Best of American Living Awards, actually, when it was designed and built in 2004. I'm probably known for my projects here, more known for some of the projects here that are retail oriented. I developed and built the Markets at Epps Bridge shopping center with the Trader Joe's here. And I did a mixed use project called the Terraces. Yeah, we have a slide. If you'll just start at the beginning of the presentation, it's probably the first slide. One more. No, that's a different presentation. Yeah, there you are. Yeah, so I'm probably most known for projects here in town. Like I said, the Markets at Epps Bridge that you can see there with the Trader Joe's. The Terraces project that I was mentioning a moment ago is actually in Clark County on Timothy Road, but it is a Class A office building alongside a bunch of residential townhomes. And then a couple of years ago, I've bought Beechwood Shopping Center, and I imagine some of y'all have noticed that things are starting to change over there. And we have a long-range plan of revitalizing Beechwood, and so some of those changes have started to take place there. Did you say it's okay? Thank you. So I guess as part of my career, I find myself standing in front of bodies like yours in states all across the Southeast asking for rezoning of parcels. And I have found that, to stand at this podium and ask for a change of use, the burden is sort of on me to convince the citizens of the county that I have something to offer that is better than what is proposed currently. I think the process is an important process when you're talking about people's property rights, people's investments that they've made that are near and dear to them, their proximity to their homes where they live. This is a process that people take very seriously. And as part of that, we try to conduct ourselves in a very transparent manner as we pursue these things. And so this slide is just an effort to show, I think we are kind of unusual in how we go about working with the neighborhood and communicating plans and gathering input in a process such as this. Sometimes I feel like when I've been to zoning hearings before, a common argument that you hear is, well, that property beside me has been undeveloped for 20 years and I kind of have grown used to it looking that way. And I sure wish it could stay that way forever. And that's kind of what I call the free park argument. And I don't think that's an argument that we can consider tonight, because I own property just like neighbors own property. And I feel that a property owner has the right to develop the property, certainly if we've been paying taxes on that property. But the burden is on me tonight to show that my proposal is better than what would be currently allowed. So the parcels here that we're discussing tonight have a couple of different zonings currently. A good portion of the property on this tract is currently zoned industrial. Some of it is zoned OBP. And we're here tonight asking you to rezone it to B2. And I think over the course of my talk tonight, and hopefully what you hear from Scott Haynes, we'll be able to make a compelling enough argument that industrial is not a good use for here. The types of uses that come with industrial are not. And what we want to show is a plan that's been given a lot of thought that I think will be a big improvement on what we have. You'll hear tonight about how we are making reuse of existing old buildings, how our plan is consistent with the future land use, and more importantly, well, not more importantly, but additionally, we're also adjacent to B2. Actually, the three other corners of this intersection are zone B2. But again, how did we communicate and inform the citizenry and begin the discussion with the community about our plans here? This process all began a couple of years ago when the Oconee State Bank was considering the sale of their property. And you may have heard there were actually a couple of different suitors looking to buy the 10-acre parcel that the operations center is on. So in addition to considering the economics of offers that were being made on the property, the bank board had to also decide who they wanted to be the developer of the property. So conversations started really about 2 years ago in me casting this vision to the board of Oconee State Bank, how I imagined a adaptive reuse, mixed use project at this corner really could be the highest and best use of this property. As the plan began to take shape after I purchased the parcels and was working with architects and engineers, we began to get the packaging ready to come before you for this rezoning. And as part of that, we held 2 meetings with the president of the HOA on site, taking a look at things like buffers and where property lines were and limits of disturbance and things like that. Other efforts that we utilized to try to get the word out was signage. We placed signs on the property everywhere there were rezoning signs, and we were directing them to a website that we specifically built to address questions and comments related to this project. One thing you'll hear when we contemplate the Stone Store rezone next is there was some early signs up that showed details of the Oconee Mercantile project on La Vista Road off of Chadwick that were a little misrepresentative in that they sort of led the public to believe that some of this Oconee Mercantile project that we're talking about now might be on that property, and that's not the case. So we realized that it was probably more appropriate to have signs unique to the Stone Store rezoning on those frontages and Oconee Mercantile signs there. In addition, we began making social media posts on blogs and community forums, fielding questions, answering questions, and offering to meet with neighbors on site to talk specifics. So let's see. What is Oconee Mercantile? Well, in my travels around the country, I've visited a lot of projects. Some very notable projects in Atlanta that I think a lot of you are probably familiar with here are projects like Ponce City Market, Krog Street, Avalon, West Side Provisions. These are projects that were mixed use in nature. Many of them were making use of modifications to existing factories and buildings and things like that. But as I began to look at projects around the country, I kept thinking, well, why can't we have a project like this in Oconee? I think it makes sense that we could. And I began to think that old Goshen factory building where Oconee State Bank Operations Center would be a great home for that. So we began a vision of transforming this tract into a project that would be inspired by some guiding principles. It would be pedestrian oriented. It would be a place where community could happen. There would be a lot of public common space. It would consist of adaptively reusing whatever structures could be used. There would be a mixture of uses, synergistic uses. It wouldn't just be all retail or all office, but rather we would have event spaces, restaurant, food hall, restaurants and retail. And finally, that the outdoor spaces in a place like this are as important as the indoor spaces. So you can see on the slide, this is some of the, these are photos from other projects that we think could translate into how we adaptively reuse the buildings that are there and the buildings that we would construct. And as you can see from this project called the Hangar up top, outdoor spaces are really important. One of the things that makes this project very unique, it's all designed inward. If you look at this site plan, the parking is around the perimeter. Building labeled Building 1 is the existing operations center for the Oconee State Bank. And we create these great outdoor rooms and outdoor spaces with the additional construction of these new smaller buildings around it. So the idea is that you come here, you park your car, and then you walk and you experience all these spaces. So it's about getting out of the cars, it's about pedestrian friendly, and it's about enjoying a synergistic mix of uses in courtyards rich with hardscapes, art, outdoor seating, and activities. So these are the merits of Oconee Mercantile, and I hope I've done my duty tonight to sort of show the strengths of a plan. I really hope that these types of plans can sort of become, and I think about Wire Park also, plans like these can sort of become the archetype, the prototype of the way development could begin to happen, a new type of development for Oconee County. Before I turn it over to Scott Haynes with Williams and WA Engineers, I just wanted to sort of summarize. After reaching out to the neighbors and things, I think that there have been about 38 letters that were sent in for the 2 zoning matters related to this project. 22 of those letters support Oconee Mercantile or both. 4 of the letters oppose the Oconee Mercantile rezone or both, and 12 oppose the Stone Store rezoning that you'll hear after this. So one of the things I wanted you to note in looking at those letters is that many of the letters are letters of support from neighbors. I think you'll probably hear some people opposed here, but there are letters. And I just wanted to read a sentence or two from a couple of these. Brian Broderick, who is a city councilman here, says, and I quote from his letter, "As a member of the committee that helped with our county's future land use plan, I would also note that these sort of mixed use nodes are specifically contemplated and embraced as part of the plan." Chip Pettigrew, the owner of the contiguous office building next door, says, "Our office building will remain at this location and undoubtedly enjoy the new neighboring businesses coming in. I fully support both of these projects. I believe they will enhance the immediate area." Finally, Ann Richardson writes, "I wanted to express my support for the proposed Oconee Mercantile project. I live a few hundred yards from the proposed project. All of our neighbors are very excited and supportive of the project." So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Haynes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Haynes. I work for WA Engineering, and I reside at 2081 Clot Delta Road, Bogart, Georgia, in the county. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on there today in terms of on this property, in terms of existing zoning. As you can see from the slide here, there is quite a bit of industrial property that exists out there today. And what's notable about that is that large portion of industrial comes without a binding plan, which is generally uncharacteristic about much of the property here in Oconee County, which tends to always have a restrictive zoning attached to it. Some of the things that we've heard about this property in relationship to the existing buffer, which is 100 feet for industrial property, is that that buffer should be applied to this B2 property as much. Some of the things that can go on in industrial property are things like carpentry shops and pretty much any type of manufacturing or fabrication work, whether it be metal, wood, or concrete plants, industrial laundry facilities, solid waste collection facilities, things that like MRF sites. These things can not only have visual impacts, but they can have noise and smell associated with them. So it's understandable that uses like that, especially for a blanket zoning, should carry with it a 100-foot buffer. But that's not the case what we're talking about here and what we're proposing. What we're proposing is very specific and is very amenable to residential housing, being that they are amenities that residents will use instead of just live next to. For that reason, we believe the 50-foot buffer and additional screening, as staff has mentioned, is appropriate. I also wanted to say that industrial property, one of the things we've heard continuously is that, well, it's been industrial forever. It doesn't have any value. It's not going to be developed. That was true a while back when there was no access to it. This property suffered from a lack of access in the industrial portions of it outside the zone store. That is not the case anymore. Access was granted to that parcel and is platted on record. So at some point, that property will realize its value as industrial if it's not allowed to be something better. The stone store as it sits there today, it's a great business. It's been in our community probably 20-something years now. It really is it's a good use. The market's proven that, but it is visually impactful from the intersection. When you pull up from on Hog Mountain Road to Macon Highway, you're faced with their front material yard. It really dominates the view of the intersection. And we believe that, there's an opportunity here to keep a business like this in its setting, but to improve it, move it away from the intersection, and improve the layout and street presence that it can have. And we'll discuss more about that in the next application. As I had mentioned and alluded to, the zoning here for B2 from zoned I as it is currently, it is appropriate. As Dave mentioned, there are several other neighboring properties, 3 that you can see on the screen, actually 4, that are also B2. Also, it's sitting on a major thoroughfare of Macon Highway. And so a project of this scale, it really is suitable. It's also consistent with our future land use as Civic Center, which calls for consumer-based commercial establishments that offer goods and services to the residents of Oconee County, and also employment-based business offices. I wanted to also address some of the specific things that we've heard. I mean, as Dave mentioned, there were a few letters of opposition to this application. One in particular came from the Homeowners Association, and they laid out 3 conditions by which be applied to this if it was to be approved. And I wanted to push back on 2 of those. I'll talk about the third as well. The first was that, as something I'd said earlier about the industrial property, they wanted to see that 100-foot buffer remain. Obviously, that is appropriate for industrial uses, but really it's not appropriate for something like this. It's going to have proper screening with the condition that you saw earlier in staff's presentation with the opaque screen, the 50-foot buffer from that. And there's also in many places an additional 10-foot setback for impervious surfaces where it aligns against the corridor, environmental corridor. The second thing that they had mentioned in their request was that an opaque screen with 100-foot wide planted landscape screen along the parking be implemented. Staff has given us that condition as part of the report. We have no problem whatsoever allowing that to be in compliance with that. We believe it's justified. We don't want lights, traffic headlights from this project interfering with the neighbors that are close to the property line. We have no problem whatsoever with that agreement to that condition. The third thing that the letter had mentioned was that all all restaurants be within 450 feet, be a minimum distance away from the property line of 450 feet. We really think that that's unreasonable given that today zoned industrial with no binding plan, any number of manufacturing type uses can be placed within 100 feet of the property line. So that 450 feet just seems rather excessive, and it would not work with the plan as presented. We certainly respect the neighbors' concerns. It is definitely not the intention of this development or this developer to be disruptive with the community, but rather just the opposite. Dave and this team has worked really hard to try and create something here that will be a real community enhancement and create a place for community engagement. Wanted to thank staff for all their help with this and the neighbors we've spoken to. Again, we have no issues with any of the conditions as presented in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the time we have available for speakers in favor of the proposal. Signed up to speak in opposition. First, we have Bill Hale. Mr. Hale, will you come up, please? Tell us who you are and where you live.
Good evening. I am Bill Hale. I live at 1140 Chadwick Drive in Athens. I am the president of the Chadwick HOA as well. I'm going to be speaking tonight on this particular aspect of the rezone. I know there are others that are other neighbors of ours who are going to be speaking on the relocation of the Stone Store at the appropriate time. And I want to reiterate at the beginning that we are not opposed to the project as it is being proposed on 441. At the top of the, what I say, the top of the development, because this project, and we are down a hill from this project. We're not opposing what Mr. Mulkey is proposing to put on 441. Our concerns with this project, our opposition to this project, are a result of the very rear of the project and what his use of this property that Mr. Haynes and Mr. Mulkey both talked about as being currently zoned industrial. It's a unique situation here. And before I get into it, I want to show a video, and it will give you an idea of what this property looks like now from my house. Note the topography, note the hill that this is on and the rise in elevation. That's being zoomed in there, and I might ask staff to show this again. Note also that the hardwood trees there, they're deciduous. It's not an evergreen environment. During the winter months, 6 months out of the year, that's what it looks like. Mature hardwoods. It's a beautiful parcel. And when you see the zoom in, if you can see the blue, could you zoom it in one more time or play it one more time? If you can see the blue stake there, which is almost all the way down the hill, that is where the 50-foot buffer that the developer is seeking to reduce this property to comes to. It's almost all the way down that hill. Backing up and show it one more time. You can see that we cannot see any of the buildings on 441 at the top. We can't see the existing Oconee State Bank building. We can't see the Stone Store as it is now at all. They're up the hill. So that's fine. That's what it looks like now. I want to just give you a bit of a history about this industrial parcel that they've talked about in our neighborhood. The Chadwick subdivision was developed in the mid-90s. When it was developed in the mid-90s, many of us did our due diligence before we purchased homes in there. And like many of you and like other citizens, we went to Q Public to see what the surrounding properties were. For most of us, when we purchased our property, or for many of us, that tract behind these homes was, yes, it was zoned industrial. It also showed as undevelopable on the Q Public map. I believe that was in part because there was not any access, as Mr. Haynes mentioned. But nevertheless, that's what it showed on Q Public. undevelopable industrial. And those of us who purchased there thought that, well, at some point it could be developable, but at least with industrial use, there's a required 100-foot buffer, which takes you up the hill and away from our properties. That wouldn't have been, yes, we would prefer that the property never be developed at all. I think that's unreasonable on our part to expect that. We don't expect that. What we're opposing is just the max out use of this property that Mr. Mulkey has proposed in his site plan. And we're opposing that in part because the reduction of that buffer from 100 feet to 50 feet is going to have a devastating impact on our quality of life and on our homes. More so than a typical property. Unless you see this property from our perspective, you can't appreciate what that extra 50 feet is going to mean for us. I just do not think that it's going to have, that 50 feet is going to have the same impact on the success of Mr. Mulkey's development that it's going to have on our homes and our quality of life. For us, it's going to be devastating. Mr. Mulkey can have a very successful project without reducing the buffer as it exists now from 100 to 50 feet. To illustrate this, I want to show some exhibits. I'd like to start out, and many of these have been shown before. Let's look at first our exhibit E. You can see that's the overview of the project that Mr. Herring put on the board at the beginning of his presentation. You can see off to the right where the 50 feet shaded gray area is. That's the 50-foot proposed buffer that they're talking about. What is in red there is what an extra 50 feet would be. That's what's showing the combined gray and red show what currently exists as a 100-foot buffer. And you can see what is inside that red portion. It's small corners of parking lots. There's a small portion of the proposed stormwater pond up at the top. And there are some drive aisles and retaining walls. There are no buildings. There's parking, drive aisles, retaining walls, and small portions of stormwater ponds. That's it. Even the impact on us with the development of this project to that 100-foot buffer is going to be devastating. It is, but I understand that there's some benefit to the county for this project being developed, especially up on 441. The reduction of that buffer from 100 feet to 50 feet would be more than devastating. It would be catastrophic for our lives and our quality of life and our homes back there, especially because of the unique topography and elevation of these sites. So let's zoom in a little closer on this with our exhibit C, I believe, Alex. If you zoom in even closer, that again shows what we're talking about. We're talking about a few parking spaces, the corner of a drive aisle, retaining walls. That's what we're talking about. That's it. The impact on us is tremendous. The impact on the developer to make minor adjustments to this, I do not believe is going to prevent this project from being a very successful project. Can we go to exhibit D, Alex? This shows the closest, the buildings that are highlighted in yellow on this screen show the buildings that are going to be closest to us. The buildings in front of that are buildings that are currently, like I said, the building one there shaded in gray is the current Oconee State Bank Operations Center. Next to it, up at the top, is where the current Stone Store is. I believe the proposal calls for tearing down the existing Stone Store now, building the two buildings that you see labeled there as Building 2 and Building 3 back to back on the Stone Store site. But what you see in this exhibit is a lot of parking. There's parking that sprawls throughout this development, and that's what is coming back to within, with their proposal, 50 feet of our property lines. The parking that is on this map is even more than what is required by the Oconee Code. The requirement, according to the planning department, is 719 spaces. This proposal has 742 spaces, which is 23 more than the minimum that is required by the county. But I want to go beyond that and see how this project and its impact on us could be mitigated by reconfiguring or consideration of other ways to do parking. And I want to read from a report from the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission. I believe it was just added to the staff's site for this rezone over the weekend. One thing that I noticed when I was reviewing this report is that the developer has noted the possibility of converting Building 5, which you see is the closest building to our residences, from offices to a hotel. I'm just going to leave that there. That was mentioned in the report, that the developer had suggested that could be a potential future use of Building 5, a hotel that close to the property. There was nothing in Mr. Mulkey's presentation or representations to us that indicated a hotel was being considered on this site that would loom over our homes. What's also very interesting, and what I want to quote from this report, has to do with their recommendations about parking. And I'm quoting from page 3 of this report now. Quote, an estimated 78% of the site would be covered in impervious surfaces. Reductions to the proposed impervious surface coverage should be explored. The parking lots create significant low-value areas of impervious surfaces. Stacked parking and a reduction in the total number of parking spaces should be considered. That is the recommendation in writing, not from us, but from an objective, independent commission that has evaluated this plan. It makes sense to us because parking is why Mr. Mulkey has indicated that he's got to come all the way back to 50 feet rather than the 100 feet that is currently there as a buffer. That is crucial. We're talking about parking. Another item that was referenced in the report, and this was from a traffic impact study from Williams and Associates Engineering, and I quote again, they estimate a total of 7,863 daily trips generated by this site. The analysis estimates 817 new trips would occur during the morning peak hour, and 1,156 trips would be generated during the afternoon peak hour or the evening peak hour. The evening peak hour means that headlights entering this parking area would be coming directly to our homes. 1,156 trips during the peak evening hour. Those headlights would be heading to us. Those cars would be parking 50 feet from our property lines as this plan is currently proposed. We just think that is unnecessarily negatively impactful on our neighborhood and our homes. This project can be great. It can be successful up top without coming all the way back to 50 feet from our property lines to put parking. Mr. Mulkey mentioned that he had met with me and my next door neighbor a couple of times, and that's true. He also met with me one time before that. And I believe that was at the suggestion of a couple of commissioners who had suggested that he contact me. He showed me his plans. I was taken aback, not by what was up at the top of the plans at 441, but the maximum usage of the entire site and coming all the way down the hill for the parking back there. When I expressed the hope at that initial meeting that he would work with us on the rear, on the buffer, he made very clear that, and I quote, that in his many years of developing property nationwide, he has never found it particularly helpful to get input from neighbors on what goes where in the plans. So these plans that you see are the ones that are going to be presented. He did come out a couple of times after that, but both times he came out, he showed us, he marked off where the elevation was, and he at all times has resisted his insistence that the buffer behind us be reduced to 50 feet from 100 feet. So we leave it to you as the representatives of Oconee County on the Planning Commission and ultimately our commissioners to give us the protection that we think we as Oconee County homeowners are entitled to. So that's what we're asking you to do. We did write the letter that was referenced. We did ask for 3 what we consider to be very reasonable conditions at a minimum for this commission to recommend if they choose to recommend the rezone, or for this commission to incorporate if they choose to recommend the rezone, and for the commissioners ultimately adopt if they decide to approve this rezone. Those conditions are, as were said earlier, to maintain what is currently our 100-foot undisturbed buffer from our residential property lines, to require the developer to provide an opaque screen outside of this 100-foot undisturbed buffer to screen our residences from the parking and the headlights, the light and the sound. And again, that is, we've adopted the condition language that the staff recommended. We're just saying it needs to be at the 100-foot, 10 feet behind the 100-foot buffer rather than at the 50-foot buffer. And the other is just were the recommendations that the outdoor restaurants, the outdoor gathering spaces would be great if they were up at the front of the development. But we ask that the conditions that we requested in the letter be required to shield us in evening hours after 9 p.m. from the noise that would come down the hill toward our development from those gatherings. We ask that the sound be pointed away from our neighborhood so that we wouldn't receive the brunt of that noise. These requests are in keeping with the purpose of the buffer in the Oconee County Code. I'm going to reiterate that. It talks about the purpose of the article requiring the buffers is to protect and preserve the appearance, the character, and the value of its neighborhoods by providing for the separation of incompatible types of land use and to provide a landscape appearance in keeping with the existing natural and rural farmland environment of Oconee County. So what we're asking, really what we're begging this commission to do, and ultimately we will make the same request and plea for the Board of Commissioners, is to, if you're going to rezone the property, incorporate these conditions, which we consider to be very reasonable, at a minimum, to protect us, to protect our homes, and to give us the quality of life that we believe Oconee County citizens should enjoy. I thank you.
Are we out of time? That takes up the 20 minutes that we have available for people speaking in opposition, so I will close the public hearing and return the discussion to the commission. Brian, do you have any questions, comments?
No questions or comments.
Were you going to offer any rebuttal time, or
We have 20 minutes available for each side. Nathan, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions or comments.
Scott?
No questions or comments at this point.
Chuck?
I guess more of a comment. I'm assuming everybody knows that Oconee County has noise ordinances, so some of this after 10 o'clock certainly is going to have to stay on property lines. I'm sure the developer knows that. The one thing I was looking for on the plans, and that's why I was waiting to see if we were going to have rebuttal time. What is your projected elevation for the project? Because I do notice the property goes from 230 to 220 down to 210 at the creek that he was pointing out. What is going to be your target elevation?
So we looked at this, excuse me, we, the lowest elevation in the back of the parking lots was about even with the upper levels of those residents that are behind. But given that we're screening screening those parking lots, then there wouldn't be light intrusion.
So the retaining wall is basically going to stand up.
That's correct.
10 feet at least.
At least, in some cases more than that. So in some cases it pushes probably 15 or greater.
Yeah. Okay. Those were my questions.
Penny?
No questions or comments.
Karen?
So I have a couple of questions, and I'm not actually sure who to address them to. So let me put them all out on the table, and then some of them might be for Guy, and some of them might be for the developer or for the gentleman who just spoke from the Chadwick neighborhood. So my first question, the one that might be for Guy, is I'm trying to understand about the relationship between the different issues that we will hear tonight. And so is Oconee Mercantile contingent on the stone store then moving, and is what is happening, I guess, in whatever case number, I'm not sure which one it is, but anyway, the one where we're going to be looking at changing the designation on OIP from OIP to B2 for the stone store. Is that necessary in order for this project to happen? So I wanted to understand what the connection is there. And I've got a couple other questions, but I can pause there for a moment if that's a question for Guy or someone else to address.
I think that's probably a question for the petitioner, is it not? Moki, are you clear on the question?
I think I understand. we were going to kind of touch on the merits and the reasons for rezoning the Stone Store parcel, and that the existing building sits at the entrance of this project, and we were going to cover some of that in our next presentation. I don't really think that there's a mechanism to make one of these applications contingent on the other. So we felt that it was best to present this request first and cast the large vision of what we're trying to do, and let it be voted on the merits of it, and then we'll talk to the specificity of the Stone Store and why and how. Does that answer?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and I can wait to hear about that. I just wanted to understand, you know, kind of, is one of these, is this contingent on the other things happening or whatever? So sounds like we'll get to some of those issues in a few minutes. A couple of other questions that I had were for the developer. Is there any wiggle room at all in terms of that buffer? I mean, you know, they'd like 100 feet, you'd like 50. Is there any place to meet in the middle, even if it's not a consistent, you know, maybe it can't consistently be the same all along the property boundary, but I'm just wondering about that. And related to that question, and this is one for you and also for the neighborhood, I'm wondering, for example, if you were able to expand that buffer a little bit in some places, but perhaps still needed the stormwater retention pond there, would that be something acceptable to have less than a 100-foot buffer? Would that be acceptable to the neighborhood? You know, since that is maybe not as I don't know, aesthetically concerning to them.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of where can you guys compromise on this at all? And so I guess I'm asking this for both of you, like, you know, who can give a little bit here to get something that seems to work for both parties?
Well, let me try to answer that as in an abbreviated format as I can. I think that it was mischaracterized that I am unwilling to work with folks and gather input and try to be collaborative on projects. We held multiple meetings on site. We staked out all of these retaining wall locations. We surveyed the height. We talked about the type plantings we might do below the wall, above the wall, opaque fencing that we would be willing to do above the wall. So generally, I am very amenable to working with people and trying to come up with win-win situations. I asked Guy to pull the site plan up here because I think it's helpful to look at the gray shaded areas along the back of the Chadwick neighborhood lots is the gray area. It's very, our areas of construction are very irregularly shaped. So the two places where I think were being highlighted earlier, the three places happen to be where parking is fairly close to that 50-foot buffer. In some cases, we're probably within 5 to 10 feet of that buffer, but there's numerous places down by the detention pond and areas in between where the buffer is probably more like 100 feet, or down by the detention pond, hundreds of feet. Most developers don't want to come and build more parking than they have to, incur more costs than they have to. And so I just want to point out, we didn't think that this request was asking for any favors. As Scott Haynes mentioned, the 100-foot buffer that is being referred to as what is existing is with the industrial use, but what we're proposing is the standard buffer definition in a B2 class property. So we designed from a parking ratio standpoint, we designed to the regs of the county, putting the numbers of spaces that were needed, working with the buffers that are required in the B2 designation. It was characterized that just to encroach a little here and there really wouldn't have much impact, but it's a very iterative process. There was an area where 12 parking spaces would go away in the north part of the project there, where if the buffer were expanded. Well, because gross leasable area of buildings is defined by parking ratios. A change in eliminating those would also make building footprints smaller, and it's just very iterative. So I'm amenable to concepts where we buffer in bigger areas in certain places. I'm willing to be reasonable within reason, but I think if you look at this plan, you can see that to characterize this as only having a 50-foot buffer and that this project is within 50 feet of the property lines is a little bit inaccurate, because it doesn't happen consistently along the back of the property line. It happens in 3 places. So I don't know if that answered your question. We are willing to discuss some things. We do not want to redesign the plan. We don't want to, we need to meet the regulations of the code. So we can't find ourselves eliminating parking spaces and thus reducing the buildings.
Okay, no, thank you. I think that answers my question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, do you have any other questions or comments?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Stephen?
Yes, I had one question with regard to the letter and presentation by Mr. Hill and the Chadwick HOA. The third additional condition that he called out was that no outdoor seating within 450 feet of the residential property lines, and effectively no outdoor noise after the hours of 9 p.m. Based on this rezone classification, Mr. Herring, can you confirm that the noise ordinance would go into effect at 11 p.m.?
That is correct.
Okay, so this request would amend that by 2 hours.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I have.
All right, Gavin? Gavin, I believe you're muted.
How about that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I feel like the Verizon guy. A couple quick things. One, both parties are, trying to get along. It sounds like they both discussed this in, many different ways, and they both have to come up with the best, that they can do on their side. So I hear that they really worked on that, and I'm impressed by that. The next thing is I've seen a lot of plans, and I think this plan has been very well thought out. I think there's been a lot of considerations, not just from the individual lot owners or neighbor, but also for the entire community, and that impresses me. So, those are the only couple items, just comments that I'm very impressed with.
Thank you, Gavin. I have a couple of questions. Mr. Mulkey, there's somewhere in the presentation, not yours tonight, but in the plan concept, there was a discussion about the possibility of a higher volume restaurant, perhaps fast food with a drive-through. But I didn't see any place on the existing plan where that seemed to fit.
Most of the project is not car oriented. I mean, the heart of this project is about getting out of your car. I don't have my glasses on, if you'll forgive me, but I think building 3, which is the smallest building in the entire program, to the left. That building, yeah, right there. That's the only building that contemplates a drive-through. Everything else is not drive-through oriented.
Okay. Thank you. My other questions are for staff. Guy, if I could. There was some mention about if the 100-foot buffer was required, that there would be the loss of some parking spaces, and Mr. Mulkey indicated that that created some cascading issues with building footprint. If the buffer were enforced and the parking spaces that we saw were removed, would it still be possible to meet Oconee County code with the existing building footprints?
We didn't analyze for that, so we would have to look at that and see. I believe the 719 is what's required by the code. But we certainly could look at that and see if that would be an option, and if that would still meet code without those. But as far as what's being proposed, we didn't analyze a reduction in that.
Okay. One of the citizen comments today in email raised the question about the fact that this is a phased development, with phase 1 being pretty much on the gas, ready to go, and phase 2 was going to develop as market conditions dictated. And there was a question about whether or not then this could be approved in phases and visited at the plan and its needs and consequences visited as the market conditions develop. Could you speak to that for just a minute and let people know kind of how this site plan process works so that that question could be answered?
Sure. Actually, Oconee County has a site plan specific process, right? So the concept plan that's approved through any zoning action, variance action, or special use action is binding. It's through the resolutions that the Board of Commissioners adopt. So when this project is presented to staff and to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Commissioners, this is what has to be done when the project moves forward. Now, questions as to whether this could be phased or could this be done in a different way, that would probably be a question for the applicant to address phasing. But as far as the county's concerned, once this plan, if this plan is approved through the Board of Commissioners, that plan is binding, and that has to be built on the subject property.
And is it standard practice, or is this an unusual case for the applicant to basically lay out a fully realized development as opposed to just that part which is a certainty at this moment?
We've had quite a few of these larger projects come through that would dictate a master plan type situation like this is. Obviously, it gives the developer comfort, it gives the public comfort in knowing what's approved and what could be built there. It gives the Board of Commissioners comfort in conditioning it properly for a full build out. And then there's all of the development processes of stormwater and those types of things, utilities that would be dictated by a master plan such as this.
And lastly, on that subject, if market conditions did not ultimately prove to be demand or prove that there is demand for this entire project, what would the applicant have to do to make changes?
Yeah, if they wanted to change this adopted concept plan, they would have to come back before the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners to make those changes.
And that would be true for a reduction as well as it would for, and there's no expansion contemplated, in any change in either direction.
Well, that would be true for any increase in intensity, right? So if there's a reduction in intensity, maybe there's fewer buildings, there's less square footage, those things would not have to come back to the board or the Planning Commission. It would be only those things that would cause a need to revisit because of an increase in intensity and an increase in impacts.
So the applicant can shrink it, they just can't grow it.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any additional comments or questions at this time?
I'll make one more comment. Over the last few meetings, I've been heard to say that I don't like a project that doesn't take Oconee into consideration and tries to maximize an out-of-state and out-of-town developers. I'm going to have to say I like the looks of this one. This does consider the needs of Oconee County.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Stephen Strickland. I'll make a motion that we approve rezone case P20-260 with conditions recommended by staff. I would also like to recommend the addition of two conditions presented by Mr. Bill Hell in the Chadwick HOA in their letter dated February 10th, 2021. And those two conditions are numbers 1 and 2 with the 100-foot undisturbed natural buffer and the opaque screening. I am not going to move forward with a recommendation of adding the third condition at this time.
Scott Green, I second.
And I would also like to note, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of latency on my end. I would also like to note that this would stricken in the staff analysis C3 from a 50-foot to 100-foot undisturbed buffer. Sorry, Scott, I'll turn it over to you for the.
Yeah, I second.
All right, we have a motion to approve with staff conditions minus condition 3 and adding 2 conditions, the 100-foot buffer.
I don't believe it's striking number 3 of the conditions.
Stephen, did you mean striking number 3 of the conditions from the homeowners association? Or?
No, striking, redlining out on the staff analysis C3, which calls out 50-foot undisturbed buffer.
Okay.
Changing that to 100-foot undisturbed buffer.
Stephen, that doesn't need to be changed. That was
okay. I was just calling that out.
Right. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to approve with staff conditions plus the 2 additional conditions for the 100-foot buffer and the opaque screening. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes, sir.
All right. Motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I would, this is Gavin. I would just like to offer in discussion an amendment to that. Maybe to save some time, maybe to give the 2 parties and neighbors an option that they may or may not consider now. Of course, we can go through, vote, decide not to do it one way, then turn around, vote another way. We could be here all night. But there is a considerable, when you start reducing those parking spaces and you start affecting, as the developer said, number of participants that can, visit your space and occupy your buildings, building sizes, which possibly change. All that is a very complicated process that goes into those plans. And of course, that's quite an expensive process as well, redoing that. But that being said, that's what developers have to do. But what if the 2 parties would agree to maybe splitting the difference and going with a 25-foot buffer, and then maybe leaving those other items off that have been listed, just as an idea, because the second and third item in terms of the homeowner, I'm not sure how we, as a, it may get to the commission and the commission may say, we really can't take away the property owner's rights in that way in terms of use. I'm not sure that when a property has been rezoned to another zoning, taking that 450-foot distance and running across that entire site is not, in my opinion, fair to the applicant.
Gavin,
Just-
I believe the
Hey,
motion.
Gavin, just to be clear, that the 450-foot condition was not added into my recommendations.
Okay. And so the
Stephen,
second,
Can
Go
you
ahead.
repeat your recommendations? I'm sorry, because I'm a little
That's it.
confused too about what they
yeah,
are.
my recommendation just is to consider now, maybe allowing the two parties to say whether or not they would agree to split the difference of 75 foot rather than 100 foot. You know, one's giving up 25, both parties are giving up 25 feet and we're coming to an agreement. And that it just be involved where it is in front of the lots that are considered, not that the whole plan would have to be, redrawn. So that's in terms of, I guess it's the condition, it would be with whatever conditions they chose to put on it at that point, if they agreed with that 25 foot. I think it's worth it with them, we allowing them 2 or 3 minutes to respond to each or something before we spend the time going through and, having a vote that may or may not be approved. And if it is approved, it may cause additional issues when it gets to the commissioners, because what we're trying to do is save them time at their next meeting. So the suggestion would be that that maybe we look at a 75-foot buffer.
So Gavin, are you offering an amendment to the motion to change that condition to a 75-foot buffer?
That is, and that is correct. If it's amenable to the two property owners.
Does that need a second?
I would like to hear from them if that's possible.
We have a motion to amend. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, and I'll also point out that the second motion that Stephen proposed adopting has the planting occurring outside of the buffer. I'd like to propose that the new 75-foot buffer include the planting inside buffer area, so that the developer can use as much of his property as he has outside of that buffer. So,
I would agree to that recommendation.
So in this amendment, it would be the 8 staff conditions plus condition number 9, 75-foot buffer across from the homes, 50 feet elsewhere, with the planting inside the buffer.
So we have a motion and a second for an amendment to the primary motion, changing the condition to a 75-foot buffer facing the adjacent or contiguous residential properties, 50 feet otherwise, with planting inside the buffer itself, the buffer limit. Is there any discussion on the amendment before we vote? Brian, how do you vote on the amendment?
Approve.
Nathan?
Approve.
Scott?
Approve.
Chuck?
Approve.
Penny?
Approve.
Karen?
Approve.
Stephen?
Deny.
And Gavin?
Approve.
All right, the amendment carries 7-1. So we now have an amended motion to approve rezone P20-0260 with conditions from staff, as well as the additional condition of a 75-foot buffer facing the contiguous residential properties, 50 feet elsewhere, with planting inside the property boundary. Brian, how do you vote?
Approve.
Nathan?
Approve.
Scott?
Approve.
Chuck,
Approve.
Penny,
Approve.
Karen,
Approve.
Stephen,
Deny.
Gavin.
Approve.
Motion carries 7-1. Next item on the agenda is rezone P20-0261, Fred Gunter Property and Sela Farm LLC. There is an attached special use. That's request P20-0262 for the same property. We will hear these together and vote on them separately.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, again, this is P20-0261 and P20-0262. Fred Gunter Property LLC, Salem Farm LLC. This is located just north of Watkinsville on 441. Again, this is the aerial of the proposed layout of the new parcel. This is taking in parcel C03017AB and portion of C03U001. Again, one portion is zoned industrial, the other is OIP, and you can see the surrounding zonings. Again, this is in Civic Center character area, adjacent to suburban neighborhood. Again, the rezone request is to rezone the property from OIP and I to B2 in order to construct a new location for the stone store. A special use, the applicant is requesting special use approval for outdoor storage associated with the stone store. And of course, you just heard the separate rezone of 260. This is the concept plan that you have in your packets showing the new location of the proposed location of the parcel and stone store. Zoomed in aerial showing the zoomed in concept plan showing the location of the new building, the storage, and the bins to the rear of the property. The architectural representative images are shown here. And the staff recommends conditional approval of P20-0261 with the 3 standard conditions. And number 4, no delivery truck shall operate on the site, nor dumpster pickup or emptying occur between the hours of 11 and 7 on any day of the week. And number 5, no outdoor sound amplification shall occur on the site. And again, the special use P20-0262, staff recommends conditional approval of the special use request with the same conditions.
Thank you, guys. Now we'll hear from the applicant or the applicant's agent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Scott Haynes. I work for WA Engineering, the applicant, the agent for the applicant on this application. I reside at 2081 Clot-Belcher Road, Bogart, Georgia, in Oconee County. I'd like to start with opening with a bit of clarification that was touched on in the last application. That is, there was some confusion about this action on the Gunter track. Excuse me, to clarify, we are only asking for less than a third of that property to be considered under this rezone. My client does not own the Gunter track. He is purchasing that portion that is in the subject rezone, and no other property outside of that part of Gunter that will remain under ownership of someone else. That property is to be developed outside of what we're proposing here in a manner that's a private matter between the property owner retaining that and some future developer. What we're proposing here is also in keeping with the future land use map of Civic Center. It is also appropriate with the frontage, given that this corridor is highly trafficked already. It is also of note that it's about 1,000 feet from where it exists today. We are asking for a special use in conjunction with this request to allow for the outdoor storage of the materials that the stone store needs to operate its business. We are going to be providing a good amount of screening and smart design to make sure that that is appropriate and is an improvement on what is visible today from the right-of-way. The stone store is a quality business. It's been in our community for over 20 years. I would say that's a matter of opinion when I say it, but when you look at the market proves that to be true. The market has kept this business in place for over 20 years, and that includes the recession. So it has proven to be something that is needed in this county. Currently, it is front and center on Hog Mountain Road, the intersection of 441, which we do not believe to be the highest and best use for that property, or necessarily the best view into that property. The current layout of the stone store puts materials storage in the front yard, which was likely a good strategy upon the inception of this business as it displayed goods for sale. But now that the store has been established for some time, it seems like a better approach can be used to help enhance the visual appeal of the store. Thinking along those lines, we've done our best to try and take advantage of the visual elements of the store, such as the material demonstration area. This is the yard that currently exists next to the stone store. If you're facing it from the road, it'd be on the left. This is the area where they've mocked up fire pits and patio configurations, landscape applications of material. This is different than the actual for sale materials. This is a demonstration of how products are used, and it's quite aesthetically pleasing. And we believe that this is and can be a highlight of the new location. What we're proposing is to put that area in the front of the building. As you can see on this plan, we've got a proposed display area. So we want to bring that part forward and let it be the foreground for an attractive building. The architecture for this building has been enhanced from what you see today. In addition, we're taking the less sightly uses that occur on sites like this and trying to push them back some. For instance, the parking is now no longer in the front of the building. We're moving it to the sides and the rear of the building. And of course, the material bins and palletized material yard will be pushed all the way in the back of the building. And we'd use screening in the building itself to help additionally block that view from the right of way. You can see there's several areas on this plan that there is called for evergreen material that would help screen it from the sides and the front, as an addition to the rear against Chadwick Drive, and we'll get there in just a second. All of this helps take what is currently at the intersection of 53 and raise it to a higher level, allowing that site to transform into something also to a higher level. Now, we understand there are concerns about this proposal. We've spent the last several days pouring through emails and questions and letters. It seems like many of those letters were written in confusion about the idea that we were looking to rezone the entire Gunner property. And obviously that is not the case. We hope that clears up many concerns, as we have already seen has happened with several residents who have expressed that opinion. We have provided additional buffer in the rear of the property. We're required to do 50 feet, but we are proposing 75. We are also putting the detention pond in between that buffer and the back of the stone store material area to provide additional separation from Chadwick Drive to the action sites of this site. You'll notice that the buffer that's being proposed on there is selective. There is currently a hole in that buffer. If you're on Chadwick Drive, you can notice this. There's a gap in the existing plantings. We provided a very specific planting plan to help amend that condition and to screen this property from view from Chadwick Drive. You know, we've heard a lot of concern about really a continuing theme for many of the letters, that allowing the stone store to come here would really change the atmosphere or environment of the county. I really have to push back on that, given that the stone store has existed 1,000 feet from this location for nearly 20 years. Allowing this store to locate in where we're proposing here today will do nothing but elevate the condition that's there today. It's not going to be a significant change to the fabric of our community, and it will have opportunities to enhance the view along the corridor. And it will not do that at the sacrifice of Chadwick Drive either. We believe the buffer we're proposing is appropriate. We currently don't have any issues with the conditions that staff has proposed, and we appreciate their assistance. I'd like to relinquish the rest of my time to Mr. Mulkey to say a few words about the process that he's had engaging residents over the last several days.
Thank you, Scott. I think I can keep my comments very brief. I just wanted to touch on the fact, I think there was some questions in the last matter, sort of about this matter. The Oconee State Bank Operations Center building did not have access to the signal at the intersection of 53 and Hog Mountain. Access to that 10 acres of the parcel has been right in, right out with a divided median in front of it for quite some time. Oconee Mercantile, the whole plan was to take what is the back of that building and make that the front. As you saw in these earlier slides, it's an inward facing project, but a project still has to have a front. And the front of the project is the signalized intersection where the existing stone store actually sits today. So it's a bit of a housekeeping matter that it has to be moved. And just to provide a little bit of color, as Scott said, the stone store has been a member of the business community here for 20 years. The gentleman who runs the stone store and owns that business obviously does not own the property and did not own the property. I purchased the property subject to a lease that he had on the property. There are 7 years remaining on that lease. So, you know, this rezoning is an effort to try to find a nice, attractive compromise for everyone involved. The stone store needs to move so that we can have an access and an entrance to the project. But to be just quite frank, he's unwilling to move and relinquish the 7 years of remaining term under his lease unless he can operate in some proximity to where his business has been established for 20 years. I think he would admit, if he were standing here today, that his facade on his building leaves a lot to be desired. I think he understands, as people drive by and see the piles of rocks, that's been good for him, so that people can see his wares and what he has for sale, but it doesn't make for the most attractive experience. This is an arrival corridor into our county. I think most anyone arriving from the south is going to go right by it. I think more people would experience this vista than they ever will of Main Street, Watkinsville, right? So where I think we, you know, in my earlier talk, I mentioned it can't be a free park, but zoning is about what exists today and is the new proposal something better? And while it may not be a perfect proposal that we have in front of you here today, I do think it's better. And we think it's better because of the reasons that Scott said. It improves the architecture, it improves the screening of the sales area. And I think from Chadwick Drive's, the Chadwick neighborhood's vantage point, I think the concern is buffer. And what we tried to do in coming here with the plan is bring a buffer that is greater than exists in the current zoning today, which is OIP. If I understand the regulations right, that buffer from buildings and things is 25 or 50 feet, depending on whether it's an office use or a commercial use. As Scott said, we're proposing a 75-foot planted buffer, and we very purposely put the detention pond in that location to afford another 75 feet or so of area where there will not be buildings or structures or parking lots or things like that. So to be quite frank, the question was asked earlier, is one zoning contingent on the other? No, it's not. However, is the viability of the project, of the Oconee Mercantile project, contingent on solving this problem? Yes, it is. The owner of the stone store is only going to make a decision to move if it is in proximity and has reasonable access to his existing facility now. And we think that we've done that in just moving him four doors down the street. And just to summarize, I think as Scott said, I don't think anyone can argue that this is a radical change to any condition, whether it's noise, sound, buffer, or anything. If we're moving something four doors down the street, you know, a member of the business community that's been here for 20 years. So thank you for your consideration tonight.
Thank you. We don't have anyone else signed up to speak. from the audience. Alex, do you have anybody who has signed up to speak in favor of the proposal? All right, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in favor of the proposal? If not, we have some people on the list who wish to speak in opposition. The first one is Lane McHugh.
I'm Lane McHugh. I live at 1091 Chadwick Drive in Chadwick Subdivision in Oconee County. I am adamantly opposed to the rezone of any portion of the OIP property, and particularly to the relocation of the stone store to the area which abuts our subdivision, our neighborhood, our homes, where our children and grandchildren play. Due to the very nature of this business, the stone store brings a large, unsightly area in which the products, the gravel and the stone, are stored. The area is large, unsightly, dusty, and muddy, with large mounds of gravel and stone. Has anyone ever been to the stone store? I have. Okay. So that's the proposal, to move the stone store right next to our homes. So let's consider the impact of increased traffic and increased noise pollution. First, the negative impact of the increased traffic. There will definitely be an increase of traffic, and particularly an increase of large trucks, delivery trucks, dump trucks, and the like. There will be no way for any vehicle, let alone a large delivery dump truck, coming from the stone store to go south onto 441 or west on the Hog Mountain Road without U-turning in the already congested median in front of our subdivision off of 441 and the entry of Presbyterian Homes and La Vista. This median is already potentially deadly, especially for a young driver or elderly driver that resides in our neighborhood or the adjoining neighborhoods behind us. Second, the increased noise. So the stone store is currently located about a half a mile down the road from us already. Okay. We can already hear the daily operations. Okay. We hear the loading and the unloading and the operations of the trash dumpsters and the beeping of trucks. If the stone store moves right next to us, this noise pollution will be intolerable. Third, let's move from noise pollution to air pollution. This very industry is associated with air pollution. This operation of this very business brings about increased dust particles in the air. The operations of loading and the unloading of the gravel and the stone brings about increased dust particle emission. I have been a cardiac nurse for about 24 years. And in fact, I work here in Oconee County. I work at the Oconee Health Campus, where we rehab cardiac and pulmonary patients. Healthy air quality is near and dear to my heart. I also enjoy our outdoor living space in our neighborhood, and I love sitting on my new brick patio and enjoying the surrounding nature in our neighborhood. Well, the dust and the air debris of the stone store will cover our outdoor living spaces and will negatively impact our ability to enjoy the outside spaces in our neighborhood. So I ask that everyone tonight take a moment and dig deep and think. Director Herring and the members of the Planning Commission, Chairman Daniel and respective board members, please stop and think. Would you want this business right next to your home, where your children play and sleep? I think the answer is obvious. The answer is no. So please, please vote to decline the rezone request number P20-0261. I want to thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Alex, do you have anyone online wishing to speak? All right, the next person on the list in the room is, oh, okay. Would you recognize that person and please state your name and your home address?
Hi, my name is Lori Mansky. I live at 1191 Chadwick Drive. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I had sent some photos of the back of the stone store. Were you able to receive those, please?
Okay, those were forwarded to us earlier today in emails. Yes, ma'am.
And I sent it yesterday. Can we look at those? I've asked if they could show those, show you exactly what I'm talking about. You know, along with the other lady who just spoke, I'm 100% against this. I actually went to the rock store, stood right there by the stone store, listened to all the noise. You can't imagine the sound of it. I love that store, but I've never been to the back of the store. Do you know they carry rocks, boulders, flagstone, pebbles? I mean, and when I was there for just 15 minutes, do you know how much I heard the beeping of the forklifts moving materials from one location of the yard? I know this store is open 6 days a week. I'm going to hear that every single day except for Sunday. I do not think that meets the recommendation that you said on the last line. I am extremely concerned about this. I think that there needs to be more looked into this. This is an industrial place. There is dust. I mean, like she said, she was a nurse. I mean, what is going to happen for my kids over a period of time? We know for a fact that people can die from this stuff. I don't think enough time and consideration has gone into this. Can you show my photos, please?
Ms. Mansky, I'm afraid we do not have those available in the meeting room.
Are you able to see them, sir?
No, ma'am, we do not have them available to us here.
Because I think they're so important to be able to see these, to show you that they're of what this place looks like. I did submit my photos yesterday. What was the problem?
Ma'am, I can't speak to that. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I do. Because I'm just curious because these photos, if you could see what I'm talking about, if you could see the tires on the side of the fence, if you could see all these vehicles moving back and forth. That's all I have to say. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
I appreciate everybody. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
All right, Ms. Clark. And I will ask everyone again, please, if you would, so that we can hear from as many people as possible, please limit your comments to items that have not already been brought up.
Hello, my name is Laurie Clark, and I'm a resident of Chadwick Subdivision. I live at 1110 Gunter Circle and have been here almost 23 years with my husband raising 2 children who graduated from Oconee County High School and UGA. There is a 13 plus or minus acre tract, parcel number CO3U001, situated directly in front of our neighborhood. It is zoned OIP. When we purchased our house, that tract was zoned agricultural, which provided a great buffer for 441. In 2009, the tract was rezoned to OIP, which is office, institutional, professional. Our neighborhood, along with all adjoining neighborhoods, thought that was a large concession at the time, but it was in scope with the master development and land use plan for the county, as the impact and aesthetics of OIP zoning does provide a transitional entry into residential developments, along with a place to provide professional services. I am here to address the rezone request of number P200261, which is calling for a rezone of a portion of the tract CO3U001, known as Fred Gunter property from OIP to B2. I am vehemently opposed to that request. We are vehemently opposed to that request. I want to give full disclosure. I'm a former commercial banker. I recently retired from Synovus, formerly Athens First, on December 31st, 2020. I was the market president for the bank. I banked Dave Mulkey, developer of Oconee Mercantile project, as well as the current owners of Fred Gunner property, Jeff Bell, Joe Harrison, and land planner John Williams. Dave Mulkey is a very talented developer with great vision and the ability to perform. I think the Oconee Mercantile project will be a great addition for the county. It will be developed on parcels C0317AB, C03017B, and C0317R. However, and this is a massive however, the development does not need to include any portion of parcel C03U001 zoned OIP to produce and deliver what Mulkey has proposed. Dave and owners are requesting a rezone of the portion of the OIP property to move the Stone Store from the industrial zoned site that it is on currently in front of our neighborhood. The Stone Store is a retailer for stone, boulders, flagstone, pebbles, sand, mulch, gravel, compost, topsoil, brick dust, and infill mix. All those materials are stored outside on site. Moving the Stone Store to that location will provide numerous challenges and present terrible consequences. The very nature of their business is industrial, and their inventory creates air pollution and noise pollution. We have submitted pictures for the current grounds of the Stone Stores, and those should be available for your review and for tonight's report. Air quality is extremely important to everyone, and the loading and unloading of heavy stone, gravel, boulders, brick dust from dump trucks and tractor trailer trucks creates dust emissions, odors, gases, and fumes. It will also be extremely loud, causing huge booms and vibrations with constant repetitive beeps of industrial trucks and industrial machinery. Another factor, not one of us in this county, in this room, or participants on the Zoom call can ignore is the traffic hazard and severely dangerous situation this will present. As it stands, entry into the Stone Store is accompanied by a traffic light. The request to move will shift the ingress between the current light and the intersection of La Vista Drive onto 441. There will be no way for any vehicle to exit and head south on 441 or west on Hog Mountain Road without U-turning at La Vista and the Presbyterian Homes median break on 441. It's already a nightmare and a real hazard. And with the increased traffic count and adding large dump trucks and tractor trailer trucks and waste disposal trucks on decel to enter in the Stone Store will create an additional visual obstruction as well as a hazardous break in the traffic flow. I cannot imagine the county would consider a scenario that is potentially deadly and one that would place additional burden and responsibilities for our county's first responders. Mr. Mulkey doesn't need to move the Stone Store to complete the project and proposed development. Mr. Mulkey wants to move it, and that type business belongs in industrial zoning as it currently stands. B2 alone wouldn't even accommodate a move of this type business. A special use permit is needed to operate as all those materials are stored outside on site. OIP zoning for the Fred Gunter property is appropriate, and it is in accordance with the county's master plan. It provides transitional zoning to the adjoining residential neighborhoods. It should stay intact. It is the perfect opportunity to maximize highest and best use to serve the existing established neighborhoods along with the new Presbyterian Homes development with a place to house professional services such as law offices, CPA firms, medical and dental offices, and the like, while keeping in step with the entrances into residential zoning and neighborhoods. I ask that the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners seriously consider these points and vote to decline the rezone request number P200261 and special use number P200262. And I certainly want to thank you all for your time and service to our wonderful community. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, who do you have next? All right, KP, if you would please identify yourself, tell us where you live, and if you would share your thoughts that are not duplications of things we have already heard. All right. The next person in the room who is signed up is Camilla Lambert. Ms. Lambert, please.
Yes, good evening. I am not going to read my speech because it's very similar to what Lane and Lori just said, but I do want to add.
Would you please tell us who you are and where you live?
Sorry, Camilla Lambert. I live at 1030 Gunter Circle in Athens, and that's the Chadwick Subdivision. And we live approximately 500 feet from where this proposed stone store would be. We live in the second house from Chadwick Drive. Okay. All right. I am really only going to say something about the mission of the Board of Commissioners, and I realize this is planning, but it does state that part of the commissioners is to provide the highest quality services to promote the health, safety, and welfare of all of Oconee citizens. This rezone, if approved, would violate every one of these principles for our citizens while benefiting only a few, the seller or the sellers of the property and the owner of the stone store. We do not honestly believe that you would want a business of this nature relocating next to your subdivision, so we respectfully request that you do not approve it for ours. And there was a court case back in 1926 that I think is very apropos, and it was the city of Euclid, Ohio versus Ambler Realtor Company. And after hearing the case, Justice Sutherland said, a nuisance may be merely a right thing in the wrong place, like a pig in a parlor instead of a barnyard. And I feel that that is apropos to the stone store at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Whoever the owner of Pamela's iPad is, please tell us who you are and where you live and share any thoughts you have with us that we have not already heard.
Well, Pamela's iPad, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm really Pamela Hall, and I live at 1050 Gunter Circle in Athens. I'm in the Chadwick Subdivision, and I'm actually Camilla's next door neighbor. I will only add one other comment that has not been mentioned, and this was actually presented in some of the planning department's documents, and that they noted there are other appropriate properties for relocation of a business of this nature to other areas in Oconee County that would still benefit the stone store, but yet not put this right next door to a residential subdivision. I, like my neighbors, am adamantly opposed to this for many, many reasons, and I respectfully request that you deny this rezone of this property. It is inappropriate to have an industrial type business next to a residential neighborhood that will get accessed and explored by kids. We had a son, and he and the neighborhood kids routinely explored this property when it was wooded. So they will explore this property. This is inappropriate for a neighborhood to have a business of this nature when there are other locations in this county that are just as appropriate, or much more appropriate, rather. I respectfully request you deny this rezone. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Guy has our time. All right, we have 2 minutes left. The next person in the room who has signed up to speak is Helen Haynes. Or is that Helen Haynes? I apologize. I did not have my reading glasses
Thank
on.
you.
Shame on me.
And I live at 1170 Chadwick Drive in that subdivision. And just real quickly, this is something I'll say that has, I don't believe it's been said. The OIP zoning designation for the 441 corridor from the Waffle House all the way down to White Oak Drive is in jeopardy. If this B2 is put in and the stone store is there, it's going to be the first domino to fall in the B2s. And our neighborhood area will be severely impacted by these. Also, even though Chadwick is a subdivision set back from 441, we're not oriented toward the B2 highway businesses. We're 10 minutes from Athens 5 Points, less than 10 minutes from downtown Watkinsville. Going north on 441 from La Vista, about 2 miles to White Oak Drive, there are residences, a school, and a church. There are no B2 businesses in that entire route. Our orientation is toward community, not commerce. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That's all. We have 1 minute. Do we have anybody else online? Terry Dunnigan sneaking in under the wire.
Hello, my name is Terry Dunnigan. I live at 1261 Knob Creek Drive. I'm opposed to this because of the reasons my neighbors have mentioned. I do want to point out the impact that distance and noise have. The closer you get to something, the louder something is, and it increases exponentially. It's the inverse law of squares. If you move the stone store and all the outdoor storage hundreds of feet closer, my neighbors are going to suffer immeasurably because it'll just be so much louder than what it is now. My other concerns have been brought up by the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have a few minutes left for the petitioner to respond. Okay.
Well, we're definitely not going to use 8 minutes. So I keep hoping someone's going to call in with one of those kitty masks on there that I've seen, the Instagram filter. No, I'm not making light of the proceeding. As I said, I live here. I live in this community. I value everyone that stood up here tonight and their concerns. You guys are in a difficult position a lot of times because people feel very passionately about their investments they make in their home and their properties. And it's all about threading the needle and balancing those rights. So my first thing I want to say to the neighbors is that I respect all the things that have been said. And I'm not up here with a take it or leave it kind of proposition. That's just not how I do business. And I wouldn't have much fun living in this community if that's how I treated people. I just wanted to make a couple of points as a rebuttal, I guess you would say. Regarding things like the addition of traffic or noise or pollutants, I think that's a little bit difficult to argue that it's an addition that, you know, there is nothing changing with the business itself. There is a movement, and to the last speaker's point about proximity, that is a valid difference in what we're proposing, and I'll touch on that. But I just want to be clear, nothing is changing in the operation of what's happening. So the movement of stone or dirt over here, moved down four doors on the street, is the same condition. It's contiguous to different residents of Chadwick, but it's not moving them from another area to next to Chadwick neighbors. And I just want to point out that nothing is changing in their operations. They're not handling products differently. There's not going to be new products that generate more pollutants. There are not going to be new trucks. They're not going to be louder equipment. The condition that is over there now is just simply being moved four doors down. So I just want to make sure that's clear. And then there was an argument made a minute ago that this is an inappropriate development for this use in this neighborhood. Well, again, this is a use that's in this neighborhood now that apparently isn't appropriate, and we're just moving it 4 doors down the street. Finally, there was a comment made by someone on Zoom that referenced the staff report in saying that the staff had said that there were more suitable locations in other areas in the county that should be considered. And I just want to point out, staff comment H says the availability of adequate sites for the proposed use in districts that permit such use. It is likely that other B2 zone property exists in the county. That's true. But then it says, however, due to the prevalence of conditional zoning in the county and the need for a special use approval for the outdoor storage component of the development, it is unlikely that properties exist in the county that would permit the development as submitted. And that's the dilemma I have. The Stone Store has been a business that's been patronized by people in the county. They've paid their taxes, their property taxes, their sales taxes. They've thrived here for 20 years. I concur with staff's assessment that we be having these same kind of discussions about conditional use anywhere else in the county. And I think really what people are saying is that they don't want it in the county anymore. And I don't think that's a good use. So finally, I would like to say that in regards to the concerns about moving these facilities more proximate to property lines or houses in Chadwick, I stand before you today prepared to consider solutions, right? I don't have anything necessarily in mind, but I am willing to explore increasing that buffer by some amount of footage, potentially exploring berms in that location. And there is a product I'm told that's called a Semtech fence that can be put up that has noise reducing properties.
Have you considered putting a building over the outdoor storage? I have on my farm a building, I measured it, that would be large enough to put all of that indoors, and I still can operate a dump truck and everything else in that building. That would mitigate sound, it would mitigate your dust factors, and it would, maybe screen this even further. Have you considered it?
You're saying putting the palletized product inside a barn or something like that?
Shed roof, it could be open to the store side, but enclosed on 3 sides, which would prevent a certain amount of sound, especially if you put some insulation on that back side, and it would prevent dust and other things from traveling in that direction.
Yeah, well, I'm not the operator of that store, and so I can't answer with certainty. I think I could see that a solution like that for the palletized materials could work. I'm not sure that the, what are they called in the yards? I'm not sure the materials.
Delivered by dump truck. Now,
exactly.
It depends on the height of the building.
Right. But I think that is a good solution, and I would say that I would be willing to explore that.
And while we don't have the pictures that the one Zoom caller alluded to, I went to their pictures. The other issue that they have at their back lot is they don't have any stabilizer for that pad. And there are products that you could put under the gravel that would keep it from getting gouged out, and it would be far less dusty if that would be considered. That area under the building or without the building would eliminate a lot of the appearances that the back of their current operation gets.
Mm-hmm.
And since I operate a farm, I've used many of those products, and they're not usually cost ineffective because they eliminate a certain amount of the maintenance by stabilizing the pad and the footing.
Mm-hmm. Is it just something that makes the aggregate, the crush and run or something stay on the ground?
Right, and it doesn't get puddled up, and it doesn't deform, and you can still operate forklifts on it or the front end loader type operation that they have.
Yeah. Well, I'm not used to standing up here and kind of making design decisions on the fly, but I wanted the Planning Commission to know that if there was some discussion around increasing the depth of that buffer on the Chadwick side, I would be willing to entertain that. And I would certainly be willing to entertain tonight the addition of a berm or some kind of Semtech fencing. I'm happy to explore the barn location for the palletized, but that starts to get so complex. I'm not sure I can commit to it.
Chuck, we'll have an opportunity to address this in the commission session too.
Okay.
Mr. Mocha, do you have anything else
No,
that you wish to
that's
say
all,
to respond?
that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll close the public session and return the discussion to the commission. Brian, do you have any questions or comments?
I do have a comment. I was in favor of this project, and I think all the things they said about the dust, the noise, we're just moving it down a little bit, isn't a big factor for me. And I've been to the stone store and I pulled a trailer of rock out of there. Going up that grade, even though there's a stoplight, is tricky and not the best. But what they got me a little bit ago is when the lady said, what about the zoning next to it? If we look in the future, we put the stone store there, what kind of business are we going to move next to it, or will it become industrial? And that's where I think we're doing a disservice to the current homeowners by changing that. And we might change the dynamics of that area, is my concern. That's it.
Thank you, Brian. Nathan?
No comments or questions.
Scott?
Yeah, I had a question for the developer. I like the way Brian's thinking there, but also when Chuck was talking about putting the palletized material under a shed, like a three-sided shed to shield some of that noise and everything. Could we also look into moving that palletized material to the backside and moving the bulk material bins up, closer towards the front? That would also, when you're unloading those palletized materials, you don't, they're setting those down fairly gently to keep from breaking the pallets. So that would give another buffer there as well to them dumping, because I have been there when they're dumping the rock and that kind of stuff, and it can be pretty loud. But if we could move that palletized material to the back side of the property, and there was a shed there to shield some of that noise, is that a possibility?
I think I'm very willing to shift things around from the site plan standpoint. I'll tell you a little bit of the logic of why the palletized were on one side and the bins were on the other. The grade generally falls a little bit from the La Vista end, the north end of the site towards the creek. So we thought as we graded the pad in the back, you would have a cut condition and therefore sort of a submerged little retaining knee wall sort of situation on the upper side, which is the La Vista end of the property. And that would be very conducive to doing the piles of rock and stone, because they would in essence be a few feet underground already, and that would sort of serve to screen them. If there's good logic to moving the pallets and the bins and everything around, I don't think that's necessarily problematic. Regarding the willingness to do a barn, I think generally there's willingness on my side, but it's a tough question to answer on the fly here. I think if we were going to do some type of barn, it would be very difficult for it to be a three-sided barn. I think it would have to be being able to be accessed and loaded from both sides. And so maybe it could be turned on its long axis and have siding and insulation on the Chadwick side, but be accessible from the north and south exposures. And I think you'll get a lot more efficient layout that way.
Yeah. That's doable. Yeah, I can understand that.
I think tonight, I don't really understand exactly how the process works here. If the planning commission puts conditions on me that I agree to or don't agree to, whether I can do or not, what I'm saying is I think there's a willingness, and I can make representations tonight as to berms, increasing the landscape buffer, possibly fencing Semtech or something to that effect, and reorganizing bins and pallets on the site if you guys think that that makes sense. I don't think I would be able to make a commitment to build a barn here on the spot at that point, but I'm happy to look at it later.
Scott, do you have anything else?
No, that's all.
Penny? Oh, sorry. I forgot about Chuck. Let me get him in order. I feel bad when I don't do that.
Thank you. I know you can't make a decision on the barn, but if they were to use a barn, I'm going to address this one to Guy. If they were to revamp this, and I know we can't do it by conditions because he can't make the financial commitment at this time, but if they were to revamp it to contain things in even a three-sided barn type structure, would they then need the special use permit?
Yes, and I believe some of the material is still going to be outdoors. So I would say yes, the special use still would apply.
Getting them a possible trade-off if
and certainly with the inability to commit this evening, I think they both are valid.
And the protocol is usually we can't go scribbling on your plans. We have to vote on the way they look right now. So that's it for now.
Thank you, Chuck. Penny, thank you for your forbearance.
Sure. I don't really have any questions because I think the questions I have would be addressed to the person who operates the stone store. So I don't have anything.
Karen?
No questions here.
Steve?
No questions.
Gavin?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a few thoughts. One, I really like the idea that was brought up regarding the subgrade, and even the developer discussed that they were seeing that grade at the back of the storage area would be, 4 foot in the ground, below grade. Looking at that grade, going back, that storm proposed detention pond area, that's a pretty large area there, and there's a pretty good hillside. It looks like looking at the topo there, that crest right there. And, with some of the material that was cut, this will be cut out for the development of the site. Of course, it'll all be a matter of, they may cut some red clay off that hill, top of that hump up there, and move it and put topsoil back in its place in some places. But if they could maintain a high buffer across that slope, or say that put a minimum height on it of 6 feet, or something like that, 7 feet. If it was 6 feet and you had a 10-foot building down there, by the time you put the roof rafters and things like that, you got a 12-foot building there. That half of it's underground, and I just or the next question is, what do you need a special use? And this goes back to the staff. What do you need a special use just to put just a pole barn type top on that thing and an insulated back? Would that require a special use?
Yes, sir, it would.
It would. Okay. And could we attach that as an addendum to this application, or would we have to come back with a new application?
The planning commission can recommend conditions as they see fit.
Can we get the developer to step back up and let me ask him a question, if that's okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Is it, that grade back there, if you could maintain a depth back there below grade, and you come up with whatever is reasonable, it seems to me that because that's going uphill there, behind it, that you could probably push 4 foot of dirt, you know, up matching that existing, that hill, that slope to that crest is a good bit above, you know, quite a significant amount higher. It seems, it looks, if it's topo's correct. Unless I'm reading it backwards and that's all a big hole. Is that a big hole back there? Is that a huge hole, or what is that back there?
Near the detention pond?
Yeah.
Yes, the grade falls off pretty good. I think I understand where you're going with that. And again, we intend to generally make the outdoor sales yard area relatively flat. I think that will involve sinking it down, cutting it down. So I think in general, most of that yard will be several feet below grade anyway, which is going to help with the screenings when we do the plantings on the other sides. What I can commit to tonight is that we might increase the buffer beyond 75 feet. We would be willing to create a berm in that area to raise the elevation of the planting.
How about the green?
Well, I see if you had a you know, a portion of it below grade there, and then you planted a, you know, solid green buffer, you know, there's all sorts of buffer material that would just about block out. I mean, my neighbor's got some stuff in their yard that they put it up, and we'd have parties out at my mother's place at the pool, and they couldn't hear us. Before that, they used to get mad at us because we were too loud. And you know, even on commercial sites, you know, I've been involved where there's, like you say, there's lots of materials that can be used, and a simple agreement to do that. I just don't see why that should require us to go back and you know, completely redesign this man's project. If he could make a suggestion to, you know, an amendment to his plan that he felt like would he could do and abide by whatever his agreement is with his customer. But I think that's seriously worth considered if he could do that, and we could just make a special use addendum to this plan and go on. You know, that we can't change any of the access issues, the DOT or involvement with, you know, an island that's you know, in the middle of the roadway out there. If he was able to match up a drive and has something to, you know, he's working on other than that, we don't know what's going on there. And honestly, they keep talking about tractor trailers turning around in that roadway right there. You know, that's a pretty close area. I don't know how much of that's going to go on. The trucks that are going in there at above, you know, below La Vista, they've got the same problem that the trucks do up at the intersection. They still got to get turned around from somewhere to get in there. So, you know, they may have to all go up the racetrack and come around, turn around up there to get oriented going back towards Athens. But I just don't see that being a huge problem up there. I know it was brought up, but anyway, if the owner's willing to throw something out there, I think we ought to make an offer to let him do that and just do a simple amendment and go on with it. What do you think, sir?
Well, again, I think I would be willing to increase the buffer. If you'd like me to throw something out there, I could say 100 feet. Oftentimes when we talk about berms, sometimes it's difficult to build berms where there's existing canopy because you don't want to take down existing canopy to put dirt to plant young trees on. But generally, I have a willingness to commit to a berm tonight of some sort.
Mr. Chairman, can I jump in at this?
Well, Gavin, have you said what you needed to and asked the questions you needed to?
Yeah, you know, I think the only thing I would throw out there is has the developer had any scenario where he's he's had other projects where he had to abide by a sound ordinance, or, you know, a decibel, you know, can't go above a certain decibel. And has he, you know, in terms of a buffer, has he had to consider that?
I've never had a condition on a property that said that there had to be a noise level maintained that was measurable in terms of decibels.
But I just know certain properties.
Yeah,
you know,
we are willing, happy and willing to live within the noise ordinance. Obviously, that's a given.
That's currently, yeah.
Yes, and the trucks are obviously willing to. There was a condition in here that forbid truck activity from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and we understand it would be in compliance with that. So I would just offer that we would be willing to extend the planted buffer to 100 feet along the Chadwick Drive, and that we would be willing to do a 6-foot high Semtech fence along the western edge of the detention pond. So therefore, that would be between Chadwick Drive and the outdoor sales yard.
Okay, then I recommend those be added as an amendment and offered by the property owner, and that we accept that and attach it to the plan.
All right, Gavin, when we get to a motion, we'll take that up if you like.
Excellent, thank you.
Chuck?
I was just going to point out, on your plan, you have a row of evergreens towards the next, whatever project comes along. If that was to wrap 3 sides, that's a great mitigator of dust and a certain amount of sound protection too. If you took that tree line and went around the 3 sides of that back lot. You see what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir. So what I think we had proposed, and our logic is similar to yours. We were planting the evergreen screen along that, which is the northern end, and then we were going to do the Semtech fence and have 100 feet of buffer with additional plantings on the eastern side, which is the Chadwick side, and then there is a huge swath of trees. I don't know what this would measure, but well in excess of 100 feet of existing mature canopy, right between the Waffle House and the sales yard.
Anyway, there's a couple ways to get into this.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for staff.
Did you let Stephen?
Stephen, did I miss you?
Karen hasn't played in yet.
Yeah, Karen did.
Oh, no, you're right.
Brad, you already got to me. I had no additional questions or comments.
Thank you, Stephen. Chuck's just trying to make sure I'm on my toes.
It's that vice chairman thing.
Oh, not a problem.
All right, so a couple of things. If the retention pond was reduced, which it would have to be if the buffer was increased, is that pond, it appears large enough that there's no code issue with the size of it. So even with the larger buffer, we would still be able to keep the rest of the retention pond, basically chop 25 feet off of one end of it, and it would still be code compliant?
Well, that would be a question for the engineer as to whether they can meet the ordinance requirements by reducing that or moving the pond and creating a different shape. I couldn't speak to that. They would need to.
Sometimes you could go a little deeper instead of.
Okay, it's a non-issue. I also live in this general vicinity off of 441, and I respect the difficulty that there is when we're dealing with residential neighborhoods that are effectively adjacent to the property fronting one of the 2 primary development corridors for our county. It creates a lot of stresses as those things change. And it's not just stress, it's financial burden and the investment that everybody's made in their properties. A couple of things I would at least want us to think about. I recognize the noise ordinance in Oconee County covers the period from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I think in this case, that's probably a bit lenient. And I would be a lot more comfortable with, at the very least, a 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. Restriction on dump truck delivery activity and other noisy activities on this business. This is a minor thing, but I noticed in the layout, that the storage building is primarily metal sided. And I know that the county has tried very hard to eliminate metal siding for aesthetic reasons. And so I would want us to at least consider the notion of having it match the primary structure and match things that we have conditioned previously in a similar way. Lastly, I am concerned about access to the site, both arriving and departing. The current layout does have a significant slope up to the intersection, but it is signalized, and the vehicles that come in and out can pretty much go anywhere they please. In the new location, there is effectively no access to the properties from southbound 441 except taking a U-turn at the Hog Mountain Light, and there's no northbound access going out that has to turn around southbound without doing a U-turn either at La Vista or at Crystal Hills and Spartan Lane, neither of which is particularly well suited to large trucks making U-turns. I don't have any good solutions for that, but it is a concern, and I think we should be very intentional about how we address that. I do have a question for staff for clarification purposes. This again came up in some of the public comments that I read today in email. There was a discussion that relocating the Stone Star to this location would increase the need for a signalized intersection at La Vista. Guy, would you briefly let us know if that's possible and why or why not?
Sure. Our understanding is GDOT has looked at that location, that median cut, and determined that a signal is not warranted there. We have asked our...
Not warranted.
Right, not warranted. Yes, sir. Sorry, not warranted. And the development of Presbyterian Homes also had to have a traffic study done at its full build out. And it also did not show a warrant need for a signal at that location. We understand there are great concerns from the citizens down La Vista and in that general area. And there's a lot of families that live down there, Athens Academy. So there's a lot of traffic, a lot of young drivers that come out of that location. And so we have asked GDOT, and we have looked both at this development and at the Presbyterian Homes development, and there is no warrant for a signal at that location due to these uses, because the traffic counts are just not that great, and the movements are not significant to warrant that and to meet GDOT standards for those signals.
Thank you.
Yes.
While Guy is there, with this 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. or switch to 9 p.m. and 8 a.m., what often occurs currently is a semi doesn't judge his ETA correctly or whatever, and he pulls in, because I take a school bus past this property every morning. So semi is often parked there before the business even opens. Would that count against the operator or these guys for violating that ordinance?
That would count against the property owner.
If he's just parked there and
right. It is the property owner's responsibility to make sure those conditions are met.
Thank you, Guy. I have no further questions. Do any of the commissioners have any additional questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion on that. We'll do this in two separate votes. The first motion would be regarding the rezone from OIP and I to B2.
I'll be willing to make a motion.
Is this Gavin?
Yes.
All right, Gavin, go ahead.
And tell me if I'm doing this correctly with how we're discussing it. To go ahead and on that B2 rezoning, handle the items that we just discussed with the developer. Attach those as an amendment to the rezone request, and simply have Brad and he, write up 2 or 3 sentences, or whatever it takes for them to, we just basically have them handle it right there, and somebody, both sides initial it, whatever, and be done with it if we approve it.
I assume you're talking about some Brad who works either for the Board of
Oh,
Commissioners
no.
or for the Planning Department.
No, I'm sorry, not Brad.
Proposing a condition number 6, which would do the increased buffer and the Syntax fence idea that was amendable by the developer. So that would be condition 6. And if we're amending those, I'll add in there, let's amend number 4 to be the 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. condition.
All right, Gavin, so I understand you to say that you are making a motion to approve the rezone with staff conditions and additionally a 100-foot planted buffer supplemented by a 6 or 8 foot acoustic fence on the east border of the property. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm suggesting that our staff there simply sketch something out with the developer to make sure that we're in agreement tonight. We don't have him come back and later say, well, I didn't understand it that way, but and that's just that we have something that they know to jump out there and work on in terms of amending plans and being ready for the next step.
Guy, are you comfortable with the language that we've put forth in terms of being specific enough to meet the need?
Yes, sir. If that's amenable for the developer, if he's in agreement to those proffered conditions through our discussions tonight, I am.
Okay. Gavin, are you comfortable with Chuck modifying the limitations on delivery time from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. instead of 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.?
I have no problem with that.
Okay, and just to be clear, I want to make sure, do you favor in your condition an acoustic fence or a berm or a combination?
Either or a combination.
Okay, we can do that. All right, so we have a motion to approve the rezone with the conditions by staff, modifying condition 4 to read no delivery trucks nor dumpster pickup nor emptying between the hours of 9 p.m. and 8 a.m. and condition 6 to be that the eastbound property buffer be increased to 100 feet and that we have a berm or acoustic fencing 6 feet high or greater behind that planted buffer. Do we have a second?
I second that.
And is that Nathan?
Nathan, yes.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? If not, Brian, how do you vote?
Deny.
All right, Nathan?
Approve.
Scott?
Deny.
Chuck?
Deny.
Penny?
Deny.
Karen?
Approve.
Stephen?
Approve.
Gavin?
Approve.
You're going to put me to work, aren't you? I only vote in the case of a tie. And right now we are 4-4. So I'm out of practice. I vote to deny the motion. Motion fails 5-4. So we need another motion.
May I ask a question to the other commissioners? If we were to an attempt to make a motion that would be amenable, is there any additional one or two items that could be placed on the existing amendment that we've discussed that would bring us closer to an agreement, or at least give the commissioners, when they see this, a little more to discuss? It's something that's on record that, you know, that might accomplish a goal.
This is Brian. I came in favor of this, but listening to everybody, thinking the traffic flow, the U-turns, and yeah, how the tracks get in and out, and the zoning next to it, how we affect, I'm against this. So no matter what we change it to, I'm still going to vote deny.
It's an excellent question, though, Gavin. Does anybody else have anything that would change their thoughts about this? In which case, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, this is Brian. I make a motion that we, again, it's the negative, where we deny P20-0261 with conditions.
Second.
And second from
Scott.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? In that case, now this is a motion to deny. So an affirmative vote or a yes vote means that you vote to deny the rezone, and a no vote means that you vote to approve it. Brian, how do you vote?
Yes.
Nathan?
No.
Scott?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Penny?
Yes.
Karen?
No.
Steve?
No.
Gavin?
No.
Yeah, well, didn't help me a bit, did it? All right. I vote yes. Motion passes 5-4. Next item on the agenda is special use P20-0262. It's not next item on the agenda. It is the next vote. This is for the special use for outdoor storage.
But do we have to do it? Last time
Do we have to do it? Okay, so
we had something like this.
by default, that is denied. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is special use P20-0198. Hugh Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, you have before you again this evening P20-0198 Hugh Campbell. This is located off of Jones Road along 316. The subject property is shown here in the aerial. It's currently zoned to AG, and it is located in the regional center character area. And the applicant is requesting special use approval to erect a 250-foot wireless telecommunications tower. This is the site plan that you have in your application showing the location of the drive, the easement, and the pad for the tower. Again, a zoomed in concept plan. The tower design is proposed, and staff recommends conditional approval. Our standard 3 conditions, and then number 4, maximum structure height of the tower shall not exceed 199 feet. And number 5, telecommunications tower shall be a freestanding unlighted monopole structure in compliance with UDC section 33505F5.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, please.
Hi, I'm Leslie Carroll, 3510 East Monroe Road in Loganville, and I'm representing AT&T tonight. We are asking for approval of a 250-foot self-support style tower However, I see that the staff recommendations are to a monofold that's not to exceed 199, which is acceptable for our RF mapping that was provided. We have engaged in a lease for 100 by 100 leased area. We will fence in 80 by 80. The reason for the request for the additional height is for additional co-locators in the future, that they will have that additional height to put their equipment. And at this point, we're dropping it down. So their highest height would be around 180 for the next person to go along. But all sites are currently being built are 5G capable. And I think that we've proven the need for the site in our package. And other than the changes that have been made, we met all the conditions of the ordinance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I have no one else listed to speak in favor, but if there's anyone else in the audience who would like to speak, you're welcome to come up. Please state your name and tell us where you live.
The bones get stiff. Sorry about that. I'm Raymond Chipley. My wife and I live at on Jones Road at 13 and 11. And I have some things that have given me over the past week or two concern with the tower, its structure, the implications and effects that there will be. I happen to have 10 acres of land that completely abuts next to this 13 acres of Mr. Campbell's. And the proposal right now is for this property or the property that will be owned and or leased and used by AT&T to come right up to that line, that right-of-way line. And I'll get to that in just a minute. And that is one of the things that I'm concerned about, and I think that my neighbors are concerned about here. And the neighbors include Mr. Jones, who has property next to Mr. Campbell. I do, and Mr. Jim Roberts, who's with us tonight. He has property right in that same section. Now, number one, we were not informed of this proposal for a tower by AT&T. No one came to us. No one asked what we thought about it. There were no letters. There were no phone calls, anything. The first that we knew of this was when we saw flags being driven into the ground on Mr. Campbell's property. And I learned from him that this was for a proposed AT&T tower, and the flags represented the base of that tower. So this was the first that we knew of anything of this nature that was on the proposal. Secondly, in the proposals and the drafts that are drawn here for your consideration, there are several things that are concerning. Number one, there is a call for a 12-foot wide gravel driveway to go up to the base of the tower structure. Now, this is in addition to the 30-foot gravel driveway for egress, for egress and ingress on the Campbell property. This will branch off from that driveway and go south of the metal building that you see in the diagram there. We'll go south of that and then go all the way up to the tower structure and all of the apparatus associated with that tower and the structure there. So that's one thing that is important to us. I noticed that in buried kind of down in the proposal here, there is a call or a listing for a number of cell tower leases. And that's to use the words of the proposal here. Now, I'm assuming that as some explanation was given in the proposal, that means that AT&T will build the structure, the tower structure, and they will lease out space on that tower structure to other carriers or other companies or whatever who might need some space on a tower. Now, I'm assuming that this tower will involve microwave or radio frequency radiation here. I don't have time to get into possible effects of microwave radiation, but there is a hint in a letter by Providence Company, who is in part of the engineering process for this tower. There's a hint there in which they say that if any of the people surrounding the tower have any problems with radio frequency interference, with any of the materials that they have, such as TV sets, whatever, telephones, that they will make immediate adjustments in their frequencies and in the sending and receiving equipment on this tower to mitigate those problems. So that, to me, is a little bit of a red herring that they would propose this. Now, maybe it's innocent, maybe it's based on many towers that they have constructed in the past. I don't know. But I thought that was very interesting to consider. The next thing was the number of cell tower leases that are going to be given here. And my concern is this: if you have a large number of lessees, then if you just have one truck coming in, but you've got 20 or 30, whatever, lessees on this tower, then you're going to have a lot of traffic just from them, much less from AT&T, who will be leasing the entire structure. They've got to come in and provide maintenance on the structure, in addition to the people who will come in and look after their own equipment that is attached to the base tower. So my concern is this: traffic, noise, problems coming in day or night to service the equipment, to service the tower, whatever. And I think that's valid because this street or road, Jones Road, is a small road. When I grew up, most of those roads were dirt roads. And when Jones Road was finally paved, it was not paved to really accommodate large equipment. Two cars could pass comfortably in opposite directions, but not heavy-duty trucks or anything of that nature. In fact, there's already had to be several issues that have come up with the problems of cranes coming in to erect the tower and equipment. They've had to trim trees, etc. And they have also promised that because of the weight of the equipment coming in, that if any equipment is damaged, like there's a large culvert there, if that gets crushed by the weight of the vehicles coming in and out, that they will speedily replace this. So again, I wonder, what are we getting into as far as problems coming up just because of the size and the frequency of use and the importance, once it's established, of that equipment. This could turn into a real full-time process here, even for the neighbors. Now, when I say that we are joining this, we literally are. We have farms that join this property. And so with one of the review articles I read on the effects of microwave and radio frequency irradiation on humans as well as laboratory animals, etc. One of the things that came out of that, there was a big review of 700 different scientific articles throughout the world. And they all came up with a common consensus, that being the recommended circumference, well, I should say radius, of a circle that would safely surround this tower with the minimum exposure and damage to humans or animals is 1,500 feet. Now, that's really going to push Mr. Campbell's house and his property. It's less than that. It's going to be very close to Mr. Roberts' property, and it will not affect our house, but it will be pretty close to it, probably within a couple of 100 feet or so. So I'm saying this that in the context of this is not just an easy decision, yes, no, do it, don't do it, but there are ramifications involved here. There's all kinds of reports. I'm a scientist. I retired. I've been 50 years in this research, biological research. And I can believe some of the documentation that I've read in reports about microwave radiation. In fact, I had a couple of graduate students when I was at Ohio State University that worked on microwave radiation for their master's thesis. So I'm aware of the controversies that exist. Now, is this without any controversy? I say in honesty, no, it's not. Because if you read 10 scientific articles by 10 scientists, 5 say that it is a definite cause and effect relationship to cancer in humans, to free radicals, to burned skin in humans, as well as animals. The other 5 say, no, we researched this and it's well within limits. So it's not a completely closed book on what's going on, but I think we should err on the safe side. And some of the information I have here state that the microwave companies and the tower companies know how to control most of the harmful exposure that would be radiated from these towers. So I think we ought to be well within our rights to insist that, hey, this needs to be as safe as possible, because other studies have shown that wildlife are also affected. Bees are affected. You won't find any birds, you won't find any honeybees in a large radius area of these towers. Is that coincidence? Well, when you see 100 towers and they're all like that, it's probably not coincidence. There's probably a cause and effect from the radiation. Now, let me mention a couple of other things here, because I know you guys don't want to stay really late here. There are 2 things that I think are extremely important here. Number 1, there is included an FAA approval of safety for this tower. And FAA says there's no problems. We looked at this, we examined it. There's only one thing about this. All of this land, including ours, is on the approach pathway into Athens Municipal Airport. And all planes, no matter what their size, are cutting their engines and propulsion, and they're starting to come down on the area that's right next to our property and would be within feet of the tower. Now, I know FAA specifies a certain latitude, longitude, etc., that you're to have your plane in. But I've lived at this location for 74 years. My family has owned it, and I have actually lived on it for 50. And I've looked every time I've been outside, I've looked at the sky, and I've seen the planes coming in and taking off and so forth. They don't stay in there because most of them are private pilots and they drift. Now, my question, and I don't mean to be leading you through the bushes here, but my question to you is this. Let's assume it is August. There is a severe thunderstorm outside. Lightning is flashing and about to knock you out of your chair. All right, these pilots will drift especially on their descent to come into the airport. And might they drift into this tower? Now, this is not really as terrible as I was first led to believe, because I was told that the height of this tower was going to be 250 feet. More than one person, more than one document that I have here indicated 250 feet. But now the lady said 199. Well, that's better, but you're still talking 200 feet or more from the ground on a night in August, and the thunder and lightning are about to knock you off the ground. Because I've seen these planes, they don't always stay in there. Now, they're pretty good. I'm assuming that 216, yeah. I'm assuming that road there is possibly the northern boundary, but I'm not sure. I don't know the exact boundaries. But coming back south, the planes drift all over the place. Some are flying dead over our home, others between our home and the interstate there, or the highway there, 216. What is that? I'm sorry? 360. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said it. When I said it, that's not right, but I couldn't figure out why it wasn't right. Anyway, and that's one main concern I have. Secondly, the other concern is, why put the tower and its property right up next to the line of our property and Mr. Campbell's? You've got 13 acres in that field that you could back off and put it anywhere, unless the telephone company has some reason, which they've not communicated to us, for putting it right there on that line. Then there's no reason to do that. And I'll tell you why I'm concerned about it, because my son is a head lawyer in Alabama for Alabama Legal Services, and he wants to come home. He wants to build a house on that 13 acres, and I do not want him going to bed every night with the lights of the beacon lights of that tower structure blinking, and perhaps some known or unknown effects of microwave radiation. But he was very strongly wanting to come in and build a house on that property. Now, the last thing is that I would say that that's not negotiable, in my opinion. You've got plenty of room to move around the structure and the land base that you'll have it on. They'll have the tower, and then on the plats and everything, they have a 100 by 100 square of land for the base and everything to be on, and for lines to run into it and so forth. And I think that that's extremely important, not only from the fact that we have kept that land in our family for so many years, but for the fact that my son wants to come back, build a house there, and I think that tower and the base could be located all over there. unless there's some specific reason that I haven't heard about. They could be located within that 13 acres. So that's the main things that I have that are concerned. I love my neighbors. I've not had any problems with them. They're good folks. This goes to Hugh Campbell and his family. They're real good folks. He was excellent. He and I worked together since I retired on a lot of things. But it was interesting to me. He never said anything about this until I saw the flags on this property. So anyway, whoops, do I have that much left? Sir. Okay, I'm winding down, heading home. So anyway, that's where we stand, and I'm concerned about it. I don't necessarily want to make enemies, but at the same time, I don't want our property that we've had for 74 years to decrease in value and maybe even become dangerous from a health standpoint. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time. And I hope I didn't ramble on.
Thank you very much. I believe that takes up the time that we have for people to speak in opposition. We do have time for the petitioner to respond or clarify anything.
The 12-foot easement is the current driveway. I don't know where there's a misconception there, but it is the driveway. It was brought out that they would lease out space. That is correct. They will lease out space on the tower. RF emissions, I have literature from American Cancer Society and FCC with me today that I can share. However, we're trained that if your pedestrian traffic is within 40 foot of the antennas, then there could potentially be health risks. However, with the tower being that far up in the air, there are none. The statement that he read that was in my application, the requirement of your ordinance, that if there's any kind of interference or anything, then we have to mitigate it. And I don't recall anything else that I needed to address.
Okay. He was asking about why is it situated so close to the property line? Did you perhaps talk to the current property owner about being in another spot?
Yeah, there was some discussion that just ended up being the spot that was chosen in the end. We made setback. I was able to provide a tower design that would collapse in the compound. With the staff recommendations of keeping it under 200, that would keep the lighting off of it.
And the staff also recommended, since we have you up there, the staff on condition number 5, they allude to unlighted monopole structure. Is that still acceptable to you?
It is. The self-support's a little more firmer of a foundation, and with us going higher, that's why I proposed that, but with it being shorter, monopole fine.
So all of these conditions are okay with you? Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
With that, I'll close the public hearing and return to the commission. Brian, do you have any questions or comments?
No, no questions or comments.
Nathan?
No questions or comments.
Scott?
No questions or comments.
Chuck?
I got mine answered. Thank you.
Troublemaker. Penny?
No questions or comments.
Karen?
No questions or comments.
Steve?
Yes, I have 2 questions for the applicant. With regards to the bans, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're getting the applicant back to the
podium. Okay, great, thank you. With regards to the bands in which AT&T intends to deploy on this tower, and this may give the individual that showed up opposing the cell tower peace of mind, is there plans to deploy a millimeter wave, i.e. 39 gigahertz spectrum, or will you stick with AT&T's more or less ongoing strategy of sub-6 gigahertz, i.e. 850 megahertz spectrum?
As far as I know, we're going to be deploying LTE, which would be and that's the extent of my band.
Okay, so there's no short range plans for 5G, even sub-6 gigahertz on this tower?
There are plans. I don't know when the plans are. Currently, all the towers that they're building are going to be 5G capable.
Okay. Given the limited height of the tower, is it safe to assume that there are no intentions of targeting anyone outside of the other two Tier 1 mobile network operators?
He's implying it wouldn't be conducive to a microwave because it's not tall enough.
No, we're not doing microwave here. We'll have fiber.
Okay, so you're one of the questions from the opposition was numerous tenants, and just given this is a monopole type structure, it's more likelihood that we would see Verizon and T-Mobile as tenants on this structure, and not dozens of providers looking to attach on. Just looking to validate that question.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and then just one more final question. In your talks with AT&T Network Planning, have you identified any short to mid-range plans to leverage the HUT at this tower for fiber and small cell distribution across the county to better densify the network?
No.
Okay, great. That's all I have.
Okay.
Gavin?
I have no question. Those guys just baffled me with some engineering stuff that went way over my head. I'm good.
All right, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments from the commission, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve rezone for P20-0198 with 5 conditions as per staff's suggestion.
I'll second. This is Brian.
All right. We have a motion to approve with conditions from Chuck and a second from Brian. Is there any discussion? If not, Brian, how do you vote?
Approve.
Nathan?
Approve.
Scott?
Approve.
Chuck?
Approve.
Penny?
Approve.
Karen?
Approve.
Steve?
Approve.
Gavin?
Approve.
Motion passes unanimously.
We left you out of that.
Yes. With no other items on the agenda, somebody give me a motion to adjourn, please.
This is Stephen Strickland. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
This is Gavin. I'll second that.
All right. Thank you, folks. Appreciate your effort.